All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening as we talk about the Auburn Municipal Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan Update. And this public workshop is presented by PCTPA, the City of Auburn, Placer County, and Mead and Hunt.
Good evening. Tonight we have an agenda that will have the meeting basically go from 6 o'clock till 7:30. Agenda covers welcoming remarks. We will go over some background with respect to Airport Land Use Commission and the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan process. We will then discuss the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan update that's proposed, talk about next steps, have a specific discussion on noise, and then we'll go into Q&A, and then we'll wrap up at around 7:25 with closing remarks. And I'd like to acknowledge the team members tonight. We have Michael Lucan, who's our executive director, who will discuss welcoming remarks. Myself, David Melko, project manager for the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan update. Danielle Wood, who is helping us with the workshop tonight, and she's with AIM Consulting. Miranda Thompson with Mead and Hunt, and Ken Brody with Mead and Hunt. There are aviation land use compatibility plan consultants. We have Dave Spencer with the City of Auburn, and we have Alex Fish from Placer County. And I'd like to acknowledge that I see in the participant box, we have John Dunley, the city manager from the City of Auburn. And we have a council member with us tonight, Alice Dowden Cavillo. And welcome for those members who joined us. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Lucan, who will then do some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, David. And again, Mike Lucan, I'm the Executive Director of Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. If some of you haven't heard of us before, we are a special district. We're neither the county nor the City of Auburn. We are a special district created about 30 years ago to deal and work with all modes of transportation here in Placer County. It's an entity that gives people in Placer County local control over transportation resources. And here is another example of where here in Placer County, we control the airport land use compatibility function here in Placer County, as opposed to delegating it to someone else in Sacramento or other parts of Northern California. So we retain that, and that was why we were created 30 years ago. As David noted, we control our board of directors, which is made up of 9 members, a member from each of the cities and towns in Placer County, also 2 members of the County Board of Supervisors and an at-large member. That 9-member board acts as the PCTPA board, but they also act as the Airport Land Use Commission. And their job is to, as will be thoroughly explained tonight, is to deal with compatibility of land uses around the airport. We updated the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan in 2000. We then amended it again in 2014, and tonight we're talking about a plan update that will replace that 2014 edition of the plan. We do, however, even though we're examining land uses around the airport, we do not have any authority over existing land uses or airport operations. And we have representatives from Placer County and the City of Auburn that will talk tonight about both of those things. But our function is merely to protect both the airport and to protect land uses that go around the airport to make sure that they are compatible. If we go to the next slide. So tonight we're going to provide an overview of this update, which is really important, and we appreciate all of your participation tonight. We apologize for this virtual format that we have to do it in, as we still kind of come out of the pandemic, and so we appreciate your participation, your patience with the technology. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it's a little buggy, and so we appreciate your patience tonight. But we really need your comments tonight and moving forward during this comment period, which ends on July 26th. So with that, I will turn it over the rest of the presentation to our staff, and starting out with Miranda Thompson with Mead and Hunt, which she'll start with the background section of this important project.
Thank you, Mike. Tonight's presentation will focus on the following 3 topics. First, we'll describe the framework in which land use compatibility planning is conducted in California. We'll discuss the roles and responsibilities of the Airport Land Use Commission, as well as the local agencies in addressing airport land use compatibility matters. Next, we will discuss the reason for updating the compatibility plan specifically for Auburn Municipal Airport and highlight the key changes proposed in this draft compatibility plan that is available for public review. Lastly, we'll discuss the findings of the environmental analysis, which has been conducted in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. So we'll start off with just a little background on the Airport Land Use Commission as established by the State Aeronautics Act and set forth in the California Public Utilities Code. In accordance with the ALUC statutes, each county is required to address airport land use compatibility matters. And in 1967, the California State Legislature authorized the creation of what is known as an Airport Land Use Commission, or ALUC. And the purpose of the ALUC is twofold: to protect public health, safety, and welfare by, number one, encouraging the orderly expansion of airports, and second, to ensure that local jurisdictions are adopting land use measures that minimize future airport land use conflicts. Now, ALUCs accomplish this purpose by preparing and adopting airport land use compatibility plans, or ALUCPs, for each public use airport and military airport within its jurisdiction. The ALUC also has a responsibility for reviewing plans, regulations, and other actions of local agencies and airport operators. Now, the law does establish specific limits on the ALUC's authority in several ways. One is that the ALUC has no authority over airport operations, which means it cannot dictate where and when aircraft fly or how the airport will be developed over the planning horizon. The ALUC also has no authority to implement the land use measures that it adopts in its compatibility plans. Land use decisions are made by the local affected jurisdictions, so the county and nearby cities. The ALUC also has no authority over existing land uses, which means that policies that an ALUC adopts as part of this update, for example, is not retroactive. It does not apply to an existing land use. It only applies if an existing land use proposes to change or expand. Local agencies or jurisdictions also have an important role in addressing airport land use compatibility concerns. Once an ALUC adopts or amends a compatibility plan, local jurisdictions are required by state law to take one of 2 actions. Ideally, local jurisdictions would make their respective general plans and other land use documents consistent with the new compatibility plan, or alternatively, take steps to overrule the ALUC in accordance with state law. Now, after a local general plan is made consistent, a local jurisdiction is responsible for implementing the compatibility plan by applying the compatibility criteria to land use development proposals within vicinity of the airport. Local jurisdictions must also continue to refer certain land use actions to the Airport Land Use Commission for mandatory review. Those actions include any amendments to the general plan, any new or amended specific plans, as well as zoning amendments and countywide building regulations. At this point, I'd like to invite Alex Fish with Placer County to elaborate a little bit about the county's role in airport land use compatibility efforts.
Great. Thank you, Miranda. This is Alex Fish with the Placer County Planning Services Division. As I noted at the Commission's June 23rd meeting, the Placer County staff did participate in the Technical Advisory Committee for the Compatibility Plan update, and we do support adoption of the plan as drafted. So just wanted to make that known. And assuming, and this will dovetail very nicely with the intro, Miranda, so thank you. But assuming the plan is adopted, Placer County, who is the local land use authority for the unincorporated areas surrounding the Auburn and Lincoln airports, as well as all of the areas surrounding the Blue Canyon Airport, will then need to undertake subsequent complementary actions to attain compatibility between the updated compatibility plan and the Placer County general plan. Some of those complementary actions are already underway, and they include the county's recently completed update to the general plan housing element, as well as an update to the general plan safety element that should be adopted by the Board of Supervisors in late summer or early fall. And both of those general plan elements were referred to the Airport Land Use Commission and determined to be compatible with both the currently adopted 2014 compatibility plan, and they're also structured to achieve compatibility with the 2021 plan update, as we coordinated closely with the PCTPA staff and with you, Miranda, and Ken Brody at Mead and Hunt, to include several policy updates that clarify our project review procedures, as well as procedures for reviewing projects to the Airport Land Use Commission staff, and land use and compatibility safety issues for proposed land uses within airport influence areas. So subsequent to adoption of the compatibility plan update, the county staff will initiate a rezoning action to apply the aircraft combining zoning designation. That's an existing zoning designation that we have that applies to all of our airport influence areas. We'll need to enlarge that to encompass the enlarged aircraft overflight zone for the Auburn Airport. And then I don't believe off the top of my head that there is any action required for the Lincoln Airport. But at any rate, we will need to initiate a rezoning for the Auburn Airport to pick up those properties that would then be in the incorporated into the enlarged airport influence area. So concurrent with that action, the county will be ultimately seeking a determination from the Airport Land Use Commission that the general plan is consistent with the 2021 compatibility plan. That will then enable the county staff to perform compatibility reviews for minor discretionary land use projects like variances, use permits, design review agreements, and all of those are currently reviewed to the Airport Land Use Commission staff. And then, of course, as you said, we will still be referring major land use planning actions to the Airport Land Use Commission staff and the commission in accordance with the state law. Some of those types of land use actions would include the things you mentioned. So zoning text amendments, general plan and community plan amendments, specific plans, and rezonings that would occur within the airport influence area. And that's all I've got, unless you all have something specific for me at this time. I'd maybe turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Alex. So now we'll move on to the airport owner's role. Now, airport proprietors have three basic responsibilities in addressing airport land use compatibility. First, they are obligated to submit airport master plans, construction plans of new airports, or plans for airport expansion to the ALUC review, as these airport plans become the basis of either a new ALUCP or an ALUCP update or amendment. Now, when undertaking airport planning and construction projects, airport operators also are responsible for addressing and minimizing environmental and land use compatibility impacts. Third, airport operators can also take steps to address existing noise concerns by establishing, for example, fly-friendly noise abatement procedures. At this point, I'd now like to invite David Spencer from the City of Auburn to talk about their role as the airport proprietor.
Great, thank you, Miranda. Dave Spencer from the City of Auburn. By way of background, I am actually the fire chief and serving in an interim role. We're currently working through determining what our leadership roles will look like at the airport on a go forward due to succession planning and some retirements in some of the key positions. So with that, I've been tasked with continuing to work with the Airport Land Use Commission as well as the county to ensure that we are concurrent with our plans. Just like the county, we have updated our housing element as well as our safety element, and we'll be bringing that back forward to the ALUCP for ensuring that we have compatibility on a go forward. We also have undertaken, since my tenure in this interim role, trying to look for improvements. As Miranda indicated, we're trying to look at best practices for operations on the airfield as well as the surrounding area. We've stood up some digital platforms to help us track and document some data. And with that data allows us to be able to make some decisions and recommendations based on best practices. So that concludes my comments, unless you have some other specific things that you'd like me to address.
No, perfect. Thank you, David.
Mhm.
The next slide is to talk a little bit about the FAA's role in airport land use compatibility matters. Now, the FAA doesn't typically get involved in local planning decisions. However, they do have a role in regulating civil aviation to promote safety. So the FAA powers typically include air traffic management, certification of personnel and aircraft, as well as setting standards for airports. Now, they also include and develop programs to carry out planning efforts related to aircraft noise and other environmental effects due to civil aviation. And the FAA also provides funding to airports that are included in the airport system for qualifying airport expansion and maintenance projects. So when it comes to the FAA and local decision making, there is a process which planning and ALUC staff are very familiar with, which is the issuance of airspace or aeronautical reviews by the FAA of local development projects around the airport. Again, the FAA's principal concern is to protect the National Airspace System, or NAS, but the local decisions are made by states and local jurisdictions. The next part of the presentation will focus on the ALUCP update and what's driving the update for Auburn Municipal Airport. And the principal reason for this ALUCP update is to reflect a new airport layout plan that was approved by the City of Auburn for Auburn Municipal Airport. The current plan that's in effect, the current compatibility plan that's in effect, was last amended in 2014. The ALP was recently approved by the City and Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, in 2019. And the proposals within that airport layout plan triggers the need for adjusting and modifying the compatibility zones. And we'll talk about that more specifically in a couple of slides. As part of this update, we're also looking at enhancing countywide policies to help with local implementation, establishing new policies to address wildlife hazards and infill development, as well as developing tools for both ALUC and local agency staff to help, again, implement the compatibility plan criteria. As part of this planning effort, we're also revisiting the ALUC fee schedule to recover project review costs. In preparing for this planning effort, we did establish a project development team, or PDT, including representation from the listed agencies. The goal of this group was to have representation of both airports as well as local planning staff. And the primary role of the PDT was to provide background information to serve as the basis of this ALUCP update, as well as serve as a sounding board for any policy changes. We also asked that each representative keep their respective agencies and decision-making bodies updated on the progress of this planning effort. In terms of the policy changes, the things that you'll notice in this update is clarification to existing policies. We added new definitions, provided additional examples, again, with the idea of helping to implement these compatibility policies and criteria. We also revisited some of the procedural policies which do apply to all of the airports and local jurisdictions identified in this compatibility plan to help streamline the project review process by both ALUC and its staff. We also looked at the compatibility policies, and I did mention developing new policies to address wildlife hazards and infill development. And there were a couple of special conditions exception policies that we included in this update, which I'll cover shortly. I think it's very important to note that no changes have been made to the compatibility criteria, meaning that the density and intensity criteria from the 2014 plan will be carried forward in this 2021 update. Now, looking at the airport layout plan drawings from 2012, which is the basis of the 2014 compatibility plan, with the 2019 ALP, which is shown on the bottom of the screen, which is serves as the basis of this 2021 update, you can see that a proposal is included that will extend the extend the existing runway, which is approximately 3,700 feet in length, to an ultimate length of 4,300 feet. We have about a 390-foot extension to the west and a 240-foot extension to the east. Now, these runway extensions are intended to help with aircraft taking off and enabling them to reach higher takeoff altitudes when they reach the existing land uses adjacent to the airport. It's important to note that these extensions will not be available for landings, so approach altitudes will remain the same. The 2019 ALP does result in the need to expand several zones. The colored areas that you see on the screen represent the parcels that are affected by the proposed zone expansion. Specifically, Zone A extends to reflect the runway extension proposal, but Zone A does remain entirely on airport property and does not affect off-airport land uses. Zone B extends to the west and southwest, and zones C2 and D extend to the west and east, primarily to reflect the additional airspace protection required to facilitate the runway extensions. The special exceptions, we brought forward the special exception for Sutter Faith Hospital, and we've added 2 additional policies. One reflects the county government center, which received a consistency determination by the Placer County Airport Land Use Commission in 2019. And we are adding another policy to reflect the Placer County Infill Green Zone Initiative. And this particular exception allows for multifamily housing within the county's infill green zone, which is shown here. The county's infill green zone is reflected here as a green boundary on the screen. And there are 2 exception areas that are provided. The one on the west allows for multifamily residential, and the zone on the east or east of Highway 49 allows multifamily residential if it's associated with another development. So it's a mixed-use multifamily residential designation, which means that multifamily residential could be allowed if it's connected with either commercial or industrial uses. In terms of the wildlife hazard zones, we have created a new zone, and for Auburn Municipal Airport, it is coterminous with the airport influence area boundary. And the new wildlife hazard policies basically bring forward the FAA's guidance on the types of land uses that are known to attract hazardous wildlife within the airport operating area. And the proposed policies addressing wildlife hazards essentially would prohibit any new land use or site features that are known to attract potentially hazardous wildlife within Zone A, and those uses would be avoided within the remainder of the airport influence area boundary. Now, the project development team worked very closely with Placer County staff, particularly Greg McKenzie, who is the program manager for the Placer County Conservation Program. In terms of our environmental findings, it's important to note that CEQA is required for the adoption or amendment of an airport land use compatibility plan. Now, the ALUC plan or compatibility plan is a regulatory document. Therefore, it is not a development project, a construction project where the land will be disturbed by, physically disturbed by the project. It is a regulatory document. So the focus of the initial study and neg deck is on land use implications, meaning secondary effects of implementing the compatibility plan at the local level. And so we look at land use conflicts with the general plan and zoning ordinances and focus on any potential displacement of housing. As you know, there's a housing shortage in California, and every jurisdiction is responsible for addressing their housing needs. And this plan or this environmental document takes a close look at those potential displacement of future housing. Now, within zones A, C2, and D, there are no housing displacement impacts. Again, zone A remains entirely on airport property, and zone C and C2 and D do not set limits on residential development. Now, the key area that this initial study focuses on is zone B1. There was displacement found to occur within zone C or B1 because of commercial designations that would allow multifamily residential uses. So there's approximately 47 units that could be potentially displaced on 3 parcels. But in reviewing the Placer County housing element, it appears that the county can accommodate those potentially displaced units elsewhere within the airport influence area boundary, as well as outside of the airport influence area. So the outcome of the displacement analysis is that it is less than significant. We also looked at potential changes to other parts of the general plan or other elements, also known as chapters. And there are some minor changes that, for example, Alex mentioned would be needed to the county's general plan and aircraft overflight zoning ordinance to reflect the new zones, the expanded zones, as well as the new compatibility criteria specifically addressing wildlife hazards and infill development. But no displacement of housing would occur within the city of Auburn. Minor displacement of housing would be it has been identified in zone B1, which affects unincorporated Placer County, but both agencies are able to fulfill their respective regional housing needs allocation requirements, and therefore the determination is less than significant, and the recommendation is to approve a negative declaration for this project. In terms of next steps, we are in the public review phase. It's a 30-day review period that started in June and ends July 26. At the end of the public review period, we will prepare a document responding to each public comment received either during this workshop, directed to the Airport Land Use Commission staff, or posted on the ALUC's website. If needed, we will prepare an addendum identifying the necessary changes to the draft compatibility plan to respond to public comments. In September, we are proposing to bring the draft compatibility plan to the Airport Land Use Commission for adoption, and it'll be a public meeting and an adoption hearing, so it'll be noticed appropriately in local newspapers. The overall schedule for this, we started in June is when the project kicked off. We held several meetings with the project development team to develop the draft plan, which was released at the end of June. We are holding 2 public workshops, one specifically for Auburn Municipal Airport, which is the focus of tonight's workshop, and we will be holding another workshop for the Lincoln Regional Airport compatibility plan tomorrow night at 6 p.m. As I mentioned, following the public review period, we'll take the draft plan to the ALUC in September. And then in late fall, there'll be several subsequent actions by the project team and ALUC staff, including revisiting the ALUC fee structure, looking at the general plan consistencies for the local jurisdictions affected by this compatibility plan update. ALUC staff will also be promoting a local staff training webinar and project closeout. With that, I'd like to turn it back to Dave Spencer to give us a little overview of the noise abatement efforts that the city has undertaken.
Yeah, thank you, Miranda. So the airport, the city's position with regard to the airport and the surrounding areas is that we want to make sure that we have a thriving airport, both for the aviators as well as the community surrounding that activity. And so we consider, even though most of the area surrounding the airport is county jurisdiction, with just the very small outline of the business district, we consider all folks that are out there are our customers. And so we want to make sure that we serve not only the aviators, but also the community at large. That being said, as I moved into this position, it came to my attention that we did have some concerns with regard to noise as it related to aircrafts. And so that started us on a journey to be able to stand up a process that included the pictorial that you have there, which is really an education pamphlet, if you will, for the aviators, particularly those that are on the airfield. They're very familiar with this, but also the visiting aviators that come in to visit the area. As you know, Auburn is a tremendous draw all up and down the state. And so we see a lot of visiting traffic as a result. That being said, we do a pretty robust job at trying to communicate out what our landing patterns are, where the noise sensitivity areas are, and the procedures that are associated with it. It's also published on the various FAA sites that the pilots engage when they're planning their flight paths and other related activities. Ultimately, when we have an event where there is a complaint associated with an aircraft, we determined that we needed to gather some additional data. I spoke to this a little bit earlier. And so trying to make it easy for all parties involved, we stood up a digital platform in which you could click on the link that's identified here at the bottom of this page and fill out the information. The reason that that's important is because if we can identify the actual aircraft, then or the time of day or some markings, we can go back and use some tracking tools to be able to identify whose aircraft it is and ultimately be able to contact them to be able to have some discussion and determine factors associated with that. So that's really important. On the backside of that, we collect that data, we track that data. And so we just started this process about 9 months ago, roughly. And so we're still in that process of getting, one, the information out to the local community that this is available, but two, being able to have enough data to be able to make decisions for best practices. So we'll continue to encourage people to do that. That serves a couple of things. One is it provides us the information, and there are a fair number of people that choose to use this platform and be anonymous, which is fine. But again, I want to underscore how important it is to have as much information as possible so that we can follow up. Next slide, please. Now, with regard to noise complaints, not only can those complaints come to us, but they can be directed also to the FAA as well. What is important is to recognize that the FAA has minimum standards. And so when we talk about altitudes and we talk about direction and flights, it is important to note that this noise abatement procedure is a voluntary process for the aviators. And we continue to express how important it is to be a good neighbor when we're out in this particular area. So those are the high-level overviews of some of the things that we've done. We continue to capture the data, and on a go forward, we will look for additional ways to be able to improve our process and really, again, serve our customers both on the airfield and off the airfield as well. And that concludes my comments.
Well, so I'll go through some closing remarks here, even though we still have some time. Just as a reminder, this document was released. So the ALUCP update and the draft environmental documents, there are two. Draft negative declaration and initial study for Auburn Airport, as well as for Lincoln Regional Airport. They're posted on our website. They were released on June 24th. And the comment period ends July 26th. You can submit your comments to the address shown on here. We are tentatively scheduling an ALUCP adoption public hearing on September 22nd. We will respond to all the comments. And as Miranda had indicated earlier in the presentation here, as necessary, we will make changes to the ALUCP and to the environmental document through an addendum process. And for those who have not yet visited the website, you can go to the website. You can, depending upon where you live, you can input your address and look up and see what the current 2014 compatibility plan shows with respect to compatibility zones. And then you can select the 2021 ALUCP update and look at how the compatibility zones may differ for a particular parcel. Most of the changes, as indicated by Miranda, are in the B zones and C1 and some outlying parcels for C2 and the D zone. There are also located on that same website, for those who wish to take the time, they can look at the June 24th board presentation that initiated this public review process. And that recording of that board presentation is available on our website. And you can submit comments. To date, I think I have 22 comments that have come in. And so we've still got some time left in the public review period. So I'm sure there'll be more. Okay, we got comment from the Auburn City Manager, John Dunleavy. Well done. A comment from Ronald Best. Thought it was a good meeting. I just hope we do not get too many of the twin engine business jets going in and out of the airport. They are much louder and you can hear them for a longer period of time. Do we have any raised hand functions? I don't see anybody with a raised hand.
We do not, no.
Now, for those who are interested, I guess this is what you call a little bit of a stall, not an airplane stall. But for those who are interested in airport land use compatibility planning, we will have a similar workshop tomorrow night for the Lincoln Regional Airport. And we will go through basically a similar presentation, of course, focusing on the Lincoln Regional Airport and the changes that their updated airport layout plan means in terms of changes to the ALUCP for the Lincoln Regional Airport.
David, while we wait for another question, we wanted to identify that the wildlife hazard criteria is included as policy 353.
Thank you, Maureen. I'm not seeing any further comments. And I haven't seen any raised hand functions here. This meeting is supposed to go to 7:30. It's almost 7:15. I'm thinking that we could probably call it a day versus having me continue to talk for 15 more minutes. So, like I said, just to wrap up with the closing remarks, this workshop will be recorded and it will be posted next week to our website. And for those of you, can we show the slide for my email contact? I think it's the one that goes back. You can email me any comments or concerns, or feel free to give me a call at 530-823-4090. I've chatted with many people out there, and to the extent that you feel like you just need to express your feelings verbally, that's my phone number. You can give me a call. And I think with that, we can wrap this up and close this workshop.